And you're live.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we are live.
Okay, thank you. Apologize for the delays, the technical matters. I hope that we are all clear at this point in time. I apologize for the voice. I've had some recent surgery that has not come back completely. I'm at home at this point in time, and hopefully it'll resume to its normal volume over the period of discussion today. We're going to first start off by calling the meeting to order. Today's meeting of the AIB for June the 8th, 2023. And let's see who's available on the call at this point in time. Rachel, would you double check for us?
Sure. We have
Meter.
Chair Leggett, Vice Chair Kerwin, Member Mara Doss, Member Joseph Manco, Member Jennifer Lynch, Member Laura Stapleton, and Member Justin Robinson. So we have all in attendance.
Thank you. Let me first of all thank our executive director and all of the staff for the tremendous amount of work that she and so many others have performed over the last few weeks. It has been a really challenging time for us, a number of important deadlines, time frames to comply with a variety of meetings. In addition to the meetings that we see here publicly, there are a number of ongoing meetings with constituent groups and various organizations throughout the state that she, myself, Britt, and others have attended and participated in. In fact, she was on a short break a couple of days ago, and unfortunately, I was calling her while she was trying to get a little bit of a respite, and she responded to her normal peppy, engaged self and getting involved in so many things still here. So I apologize for having to call you, but I think it's a reflection of the hard work that you have performed over so many months and years as we've gone through this process. Our first thing to do today is to adopt our meeting minutes. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to look at the summary, and if so, we'll have an adoption of that. So if there's a motion to so approve, we will do that at this point in time.
So moved.
There's a second to the motion?
I second.
Moved and second that we adopt the summary of the meetings from the last meeting. Are there any questions or discussion in reference to that? Hearing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, they're so approved. I don't think we have any revisions to the agenda, but let's go back and explain precisely what we're going to do today. The first part of this will go through the agenda as noted. There will be an executive session at the end, and we will do that and when we get to that point. I'm going to immediately go to our executive director now in terms of brevity of time, since we started a little bit late, and to provide an update from Rachel, from our executive director, Ms. Heiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to go a little out of order on the agenda and start with the update on recruitment and procurement. So in terms of recruitment, I'm very pleased to introduce our new executive assistant to the board and to myself, Shawanda Smith, who joined the AIB team last week. And we are very, very happy to have her on board. And I just want to make it clear that the technical difficulties today had nothing to do with Shawanda. So this was we did not throw her that far into the deep end of the pool today. So so welcome, Shawanda, and we're really happy to have you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Aye.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
We are also in the final stages of hiring a deputy director for operations. So that person should be on board by the end of the month. And so we're also very excited about that. And then we are in the process of getting the job notices ready to post for several other positions. The Research and Accountability Director, the Outreach and Communications Director, and then we're going to start to recruit for the Education Program / Policy Analyst, and we're going to do that in a staggered recruitment so that we can not bring them all on board at the same time. So we'll be posting for those positions in the next month. So keep an eye out on the website for everyone listening and watching for those job notices.
Director Heiss, would you explain for the public why this process takes so long? Because I've had this question directed at me from a number of sources, why we have not been able to fill all those positions as aggressively as we probably anticipate. So would you explain that process a little bit for us?
Sure. Well, there is we are moving as quickly as we can, but there are a number of steps that have to be followed in order to create a job announcement, post a job announcement. The postings are up for 2 to 3 weeks each, and then reviewing the applications, which we've been lucky enough to have a significant volume of applications for the positions that we have posted, which is wonderful, but also takes additional time to vet all of the applicants and determine who to interview. And then that process, and then the actual hiring process is also takes several weeks. So it's just the combination of all the various pieces of the process that do take longer than you would think. And we are moving as quickly as we can.
That is somewhat consistent with our state procurement and hiring practices as well.
Yes, we're following the state hiring practices.
Just want to make sure people understood that. Thank you.
So as I said, we will be posting several job notices in the next month, hopefully by the end of the month, and keep the process moving so we can keep bringing on additional staff. We also did post the RFP for the communications and outreach services, and those proposals were received on Friday. So we're now in the process of reviewing those. We did get a number of proposals, and our goal is to come back to the board at the next meeting with a recommendation for a contract. So we're expediting that process as quickly as we can as well.
And the potential changes for the website?
So part of the scope of the RFP for the communications and outreach consultant is to review the website, both the materials that are on the website, the style, the accessibility of the materials on the website, and make recommendations and then work with us to make changes to the website and also to our social media posts and sort of the messaging that we have, which is limited at this point. That is exactly why we are bringing a communications consultant on board.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. So that covers that update on recruitment and the communications consultant. I also wanted to give you a update on the LEA and state plan reviews, and also the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan update. Emma, if you could share your screen, just have some slides that I'll run through very quickly. So this is the timeline, and we've lopped off the front end of it that we've already gotten through when the plans were submitted in March. Thank you very much. Board Member Doss, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did have a question, and this is pertaining to the communications consultant. And I probably ask the same question all the time. So we're going to have a communications consultant, and we're also going to have a communications staff member as well.
Yes, so the consultant, the RFP for the consultant is to develop a communications outreach plan and then work with the AIB to implement the plan. And so the person that they would be primarily working with, once we have that person on board, will be the outreach and communication director that will be actually implementing the plan with the support of the consultant.
Okay, all right.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions before I move on? Okay, so this is the timeline, and we're sort of, as we all know, we're here in sort of between mid-May and mid-June here on the timeline. So right now we're in the process of the AIB has shared feedback with some LEAs regarding additional revisions that are needed to their plans, and we're in the process of receiving those revisions, and we'll be reviewing those. We're also receiving additional recommendations from MSDE on plan approvals for LEAs, and as we get those recommendations from MSDE, then what AIB staff are comparing the feedback that MSDE provided and the feedback that AIB reviews generated, and identifying sort of the highest priority revisions that LEAs may need to make to their plans. So all of that is in process right now, as well as the AIB and CTE committee staff have been reviewing the career counseling MOUs that were submitted with the LEA plans back in March, and I'll get into a little more detail about that in a minute. So we're at the part of the process where we are we're reviewing revised plans as they are coming to us from MSDE, and then we're also reviewing revised plans as they are coming back from the LEAs in response to AIB feedback. And we will be bringing all of that and staff recommendations on plan approvals to the board for consideration of approvals beginning in July. Just as a reminder, there's just a little, we'll just call it a quirk in the law that does not allow the AIB to approve any plans in the month of June. So that is why we won't be bringing you any recommended approvals in June, but we will be bringing them to you in July. Vice Chair Kerwin?
Yes. Rachel, in addition to, you mentioned the CTE, but MSDE and MHEC are also supposed to be submitting. Have they submitted their plans, and when will we get recommendations on their approval?
Yes, they have. So let me, if you could just hold that question for a moment, but they have submitted their plans.
Good.
And so Emma, if you could go to the next slide, just really quickly, for the LEA plan review, for the revisions that AIB staff have been bringing back to the LEAs following the MSDE review, we've really honed in on very specific revisions that relate to something related to the criteria for success that was not adequately addressed, something that was in the comprehensive plan as a requirement that was not adequately addressed in their revisions, or a statutory requirement in the blueprint law that is not adequately addressed in their plans as revised and submitted to MSDE. So we're being very selective about what we're asking the LEAs to revise, because we understand that they've been through a couple of rounds of revisions now. And all of that feedback that I'm talking about is going to be shared publicly when the AIB's deliberative process is completed. So meaning when the plans come to the board for approval, all of the feedback and documents that are related to that approval will all be made public at that time. Next slide. And we have been holding office hours for LEAs to meet with AIB staff to discuss the feedback that we've provided and the revisions that have been requested. And I think those have been really constructive and productive. We've had some LEAs have come back to more than one office hour and are even sharing drafts of their revisions so that they can have a good sense of that they're on the right track. So those have been, I think, very constructive. We did want to just highlight some themes for what we've been asking the LEAs to revise in their plans. And they really, the three themes that we wanted to identify here. One is, and there is a requirement in the blueprint that that high quality tutoring be provided to students during the school day specifically. And in a number of cases, the LEA's plans talk about tutoring generally, or they specifically refer to before and after school tutoring, but don't specify the during the school day tutoring. So that's been one theme where several LEAs have needed to go back and revise that. Another area is around the college and career readiness plans that the blueprint requires be developed for each student who is not CCR by the end of 10th grade, and specifically that the development of that plan be led by a teacher, which is a requirement of the blueprint law. And in some cases, many LEAs actually already have a plan, a graduation plan, a 4-year plan. Some LEAs have 6-year plans. But what the blueprint is calling for is a little different than what the LEAs currently have. And so in some cases, there have been some miscommunications or misinterpretations that what they're already doing would satisfy what the blueprint calls for. And then the third area that has been a particular theme of the needed revisions is really around the financial capability to track school level budget allocations and expenditures. And school level is the key word there. That's something that the blueprint requires that LEAs have not been required to do in the past. And the tracking is necessary for the AIB and MSDE and others to determine whether the LEAs are meeting the new minimum school funding requirements that are a part of the blueprint. So for many LEAs, the response in their initial plans did not cover the full both budgeted and expenditure side of the tracking requirement, or indicate that they are sort of understanding or realize that they're going to need to meet these minimum funding requirements starting in fiscal 25. So those are really some themes for the kind of revisions that AIB has been asking for from the LEAs after the MSDE review has been completed. Next slide. And then as part of this LEA review, we've also been looking at the career counseling MOUs. And I started to explain earlier that draft MOUs were submitted with the LEA plans in March. But in many cases, those MOUs were in the very early stages when they submitted them in March. And so working with our colleagues at the LEAs and the CTE committee, we went back to the partners. And as a reminder, the MOUs are between the LEAs, the local workforce development boards, and the community colleges. So it's a 3-way MOU. So we went back and asked them to submit if they had an updated MOU to provide that to us earlier in May. And then AIB and CTE committee staff have reviewed each plan. And we did invite MSDE to participate in this process as well. And we really were looking to make sure that the specific requirements of the law were being met, as well as various provisions of the guidance and the FAQs that were provided to the partners in February to ensure that the programs are on the right track, let's say. I think a lot of the MOUs are lacking in detail, and what the feedback has been provided earlier this week to the partners, and we have asked for certain revisions, and they have a couple of weeks to get those revisions back to us. Just like we did with the LEA plans, we've really honed in on what they're being asked to revise in their plans to sort of the most important pieces that need to be in place for the programs to get up and running. And that is particularly, there have been a number of questions around the funding mechanism and making sure that the funds are available to the local workforce boards and the community colleges as they need them. In many cases, or I shouldn't say many cases, in some cases, the MOUs are only for 1 year, and they are required. It is a 3-year program, so the MOUs are required to run for 3 years. So, but then other feedback has been provided around, programming requirements, outcome measures, and evaluation requirements that are not being asked. They're not being asked to revise their plans to address those right now. They're being asked to work on it, and the AIB and CTE are going to be holding a meeting with each MOU team in the fall, and we'll be checking in on the various feedback that's been provided around other elements of the MOUs that need more detail and more work, but that we're not asking them to revise their MOUs at this time. And I think, Member Doss, do you have your hand up?
Thank you. And this is a comment pertaining to the implementation plans. And just you're going through the timeline just made me think about the work that the LEAs have put into these implementation plans. And from what I've seen and I've looked at them, they have really demonstrated their commitment to the blueprint and what everyone is trying to do. And we're asking them to do a lot. And the timeline right now is convoluted. It's back and forth for them. And we know reasons why, but I just wanted to just get this off my chest. It's back and forth, and it feels like they're going through the dissertation process where they're making revisions, and then one entity says do something else, or it's just confusing. And I'm hoping that we have an opportunity to streamline that timeline for the sake of our LEAs and for the sake of getting this right, because no one wants to go through all of this to get the job done. So I just had to get that off my chest. Thanks.
We're doing what we can to minimize the back and forth, but I absolutely share your concern, and we've certainly heard from the LEAs that while they understand that that they need to do what we're asking them to do, that it has been challenging for them, and we appreciate that, and we definitely need to do better. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next slide, which is on Dr. Kerwin's question related to the state agency and entity reviews. So we have received plans from the State Department of Education, the Higher Education Commission, the CTE Committee, and the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. We have been reviewing those. We've also been identifying and working with experts in the various fields to review all or portions of the plans. And we're in the process of finalizing the evaluation rubrics and calibrating with the reviewers. And we will be formally gathering feedback from the reviewers and then providing that feedback if needed back to the agencies and entities to request revisions to their plans next month. So it's possible that we may have a recommendation for a state plan approval in July, but it's probably more likely that those would come beginning in August. Does that answer your question, Dr. Kerwin, or do you have others?
It does.
Okay.
And just to refresh my memory, we have the same withholding of funding authority for these entities as we do the LEAs. Is that correct?
We do have fund withholding authority. It's not exactly the same. For the LEAs, there's an automatic withholding of 25% of their new blueprint funds.
Right.
For the state,
And we basically release the funds.
there's no automatic withholding, right? So the board can determine to withhold a portion of a state agency's funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Emma, I've lost track. I'm not sure what the next slide is, but thank you. Okay. So if there aren't any questions about the blueprint plans, we can move on to the update of the comprehensive plan, which hard to believe it's already time to do that. But obviously we have a shorter time this year because the initial plan was adopted in December. The annual updates will be each year by August 1st. And so we just wanted to sort of provide sort of a high level overview of the update process. Obviously, we're going to be incorporating the changes to the law from the 2023 legislative session. We're also, the outcome measures work group is going to be making recommendations around outcome measures for at the blueprint level and pillar specific measures that will then have targets set for them and tracking publicly. And I know Dr. Stapleton and Mr. Manko are going to give an update on that a little later in the meeting. We're also going to be reviewing the implementation considerations that were included in the initial plan, and particularly if there are new considerations that need to be incorporated. And as part of the outcome measures work group, the group has done a lot of, has identified a number of implementation considerations that have come up as we've been discussing the outcome measures and the metrics that we may want to incorporate into the updated plan, as well as any other revisions to the implementation guidance and requirements. One provision that we do know that we want to recommend making a change to is the hiring and diversity report that the LEAs are required under the plan to submit annually. Just as a reminder, the hiring diversity report was initially a legislative requirement, a one-time legislative requirement. So they all submitted those plans to us last July. And as part of the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, the AIB said, we would like this report done every year so that we have updated information on your hiring diversity, as well as sort of the plans that the LEAs have to improve the diversity of their hiring and their retention. And so we just used the same July 1st date as the original reporting requirement, but it's come to our attention that the timing of when staffing data is available and new staffing data is available the timing of a July 1 report does not make sense. And so we are recommending that we align the timing with the data that already is being reported to MSDE in October and through mid-November. from middle of October to middle of November is when the annual staffing data is reported to MSDE. And so we are going to recommend that we go ahead and move that reporting date to December so that we're not asking the LEAs to kind of do twice the work when they already are having to submit the data in October. And then I think the last slide on this, possibly, right, is the public input. So we want to make sure, of course, that we're going to be collecting feedback for the updated Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. We're going to be posting, we do have a number of Google feedback forms on the website. So we actually have created a page that is all the different feedback opportunities that are currently available to the public. And the link is here, and the public, all these materials are posted on the website, and so you can use that to get the links. And so we will take whatever public feedback we receive on updates to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. We'll share those with the board members and with the public so that everyone's aware of what recommendations we're receiving about updates to the comprehensive plan. And then we have had a feedback form on the website for since April, at least, for any public feedback on any of the LEA implementation plans, any of the state agency or entity implementation plans. We welcome your feedback, and we will review it and incorporate it where appropriate. I believe at this point we've gotten very little feedback on any of the LEA plans or the state blueprint plans. I think that's it for this piece of the agenda, unless there are more questions.
And no additional questions, and let's go to the next section.
I don't have any questions, but I also just wanted to surface how much I appreciate the level of public input that has been solicited along the way. So all of these feedback forms, having the option for public comment, in integrating members into advisory committees, work groups, like I really just appreciate the level of transparency and the eagerness to get involvement and cooperation from members of the public to make this a strong process.
Thank you, Member Manco. Director Heiss.
Yeah. So the next item relates to the financial report, and the first item relates to our Assistant Attorney General, Heidi Detterer, who has been our interim legal counsel since the end of October. There she is, and is now been assigned as our permanent legal counsel. So we're very happy to have her as a permanent member of the team. And as I think you all know, Heidi splits her duties between the AIB and the Interagency Commission on School Construction, known as the IAC. So she spends half of her time working on issues for us and half of her time for the IAC. And so as part of that process, we needed to develop a services and cost sharing agreement between the AIB and IAC regarding Heidi's work. And so we do have, and you all have, and Emma, if you could maybe put it on the screen, please, a draft cost sharing agreement. This is the motion. The other document. I know it's a lot, and we have a lot of meeting materials for today. So I'll just keep explaining it. So essentially, we've negotiated an agreement with the IAC whereby the AIB will reimburse the IAC for 50% of Heidi's salary and benefits. There we go. Thank you very much. 50% of her salary and benefits, and moving forward, we will do that quarterly. But for fiscal 23, we will be reimbursing them in one lump sum back to, I think, November 2nd was the first pay period that Heidi was working with the IAC, sorry, AIB. And so we will be doing that moving forward in 24. We'll pay that quarterly and at least through fiscal 24. And there are some provisions you can see in number 4 there around if there is any actual or potential legal conflict between AIB and IAC, then another attorney will be assigned so that we don't have any legal conflicts of interest. And that pretty much summarizes the agreement. Heidi, did you want to add anything?
No, you did a great job summing it up. I just wanted to thank the board for the opportunity to represent them.
Great. So then, Emma, if you can go back to the other document that you had shown on the screen first. This is a motion to, essentially what we need is a motion to not to approve the expenditure, but to approve the MOU, the cost sharing agreement between the AIB and the IAC. And then once you approve this cost sharing agreement, then we will take that as approval of the expenditures that go along with the approved cost sharing and service sharing agreement. I think we haven't received an invoice yet, so we don't have an exact amount for fiscal 23, but I think it's in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $70,000 or so. And we'll be sure to, update you on what that exact amount is when we do have it. But if we could have a motion to approve the cost sharing agreement between the IAC and AIB, that would be perfect.
Well, I'll make the motion.
And I forgot, I should have asked first if there are any questions, of course, before there's a motion. I don't see any hands.
Seems very straightforward. So I move the adoption.
I'll second.
And I think actually the chair had to briefly
Oh, I
leave
see.
the
Okay,
meeting.
so I'll step in and in any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Right. Okay, the next item is the proposal for a technical assistance grant program. And Emma, if you can, the description document. This is also available on the website and actually I'm going to open it because it's a little too small for me to read. Here we go. Okay. So this is a proposal to and just as way of background, the AIB is specifically charged with providing technical assistance on blueprint implementation to the LEAs and the CTE committee. And under the law in fiscal 22, 23, and 24, $3 million is provided in the budget to provide that technical assistance. You may recall that the AIB, we did not actually receive those funds in fiscal 22 due to the timing of when the law took effect and when the budget was introduced. So the fiscal 22 funds were not available to us. The fiscal 23 funds have been in the budget, but as you also may recall, we haven't actually had the ability to access funds in our budget until January of this year. So we have been thinking and using the experience of the 2023 implementation plans and sort of what we're seeing in those plans, and also in talking with LEAs and various blueprint coordinators and all sorts of different folks from LEAs. And so what we're proposing is to use the funds that are available in fiscal 23 to create a grant program. And what this grant program would do is it would support the services of a strategic facilitator or strategic planner. That kind of, the terms are sort of interchangeable, to help the LEAs really think very strategically about how they're going to implement the blueprint, both within pillars and across pillars, and how they're going to integrate the blueprint with what they're already doing, and how they're really thinking about being transformational and doing things differently, and helping them to support that thought process, because it's a lot of work. We're asking a lot of the LEAs and the CTE committee, and we want to be supportive in helping them be able to achieve, develop a plan and develop policies that are really going to implement the blueprint as intended and achieve the results that we're all looking for. So what this would do is it would allocate each LEA, and the CTE committee would receive the equivalent of $100,000 worth of services from a strategic facilitator they would be selecting that facilitator from a list of eligible consultants that the AIB would determine. We would vet. We would do some sort of application or RFP process to collect applications or proposals from various consultants and vet them. And then we would have a list of eligible consultants that the LEAs would then be able to choose from, and they could interview them and talk with them and determine who might be the best fit for them to work with them. And we do have, if you could just scroll down a little bit there, Emma, right there in the middle, the strategic planners, we're in the process of drafting the application or RFP for this, but we have done some thinking about the kinds of skills and experience that we would need the strategic facilitators to have. And this includes experience in the education field and experience working with diverse education stakeholders, as well as facilitating inclusive dialogue and decision-making. And, really importantly, knowledge of best practices and systems change and in change management. Board Member Manko, did you have a question?
Yeah, is the vision to have these strategic facilitators have kind of a wide breadth of knowledge so that they are able to support across many different portions of the local plans, or is it to have some kind of specialized knowledge, have experts that are on have deep expertise around forming career ladders, or around recruitment of teachers, or around national board certification, or community schools, or any of these kind of like very targeted initiatives?
So that's a great question. So the facilitators are not intended to be experts in the blueprint or necessarily experts in specific policies or practices that are called for in the blueprint, but really their key skill is going to be working with the team to elicit the conversations and the discussions around the sticking points, and then coming back to AIB staff and potentially our other consultants or experts that are going to provide specific technical assistance around the content areas, like the career ladder or reorganization of the school days to accommodate the career ladder and the teacher leadership roles. So they need to have knowledge of education, they need to have worked in the education field, but they don't necessarily aren't going to be expected to be experts in the blueprint. We will do an onboarding and training of them, and then we will regularly, they will be regularly meeting with the AIB staff so that they can both ask questions, raise areas where there are challenges or concerns, and then we can also share that technical information, and also, be invited to join a meeting or send either through us or through a consultant, provide the actual content-based technical assistance that's needed. Does that?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. I think Member Stapleton's hand was up next.
Yep, thank you. First of all, I want to say I'm very happy to see us finally tapping into these dollars that I wish we could have had access to earlier to help out the LEAs. And I also wanted to just clarify, you mentioned education when you were talking, and I think you have a revised document that specifies education in this paragraph, but the paragraph that says strategic planners starts with strategic planners / facilitators. Should have, I don't know what the wording is in this meeting, but comments about expertise in the educational systems.
Yes, and I think Emma now
Oh.
has the correct version up on the.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you, Emma.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Board Member Robinson?
Yes, thank you, Director. Hi. I definitely appreciate this opportunity for capacity building. I think this is a great move, and as my colleague was saying, a great use of the funds that have been allotted to support the LEAs. When you were speaking, you used the word transformational, and I see even in the text ambitious and aspirational improvements to our students' educational journeys. And so I guess I just want to uplift that a little bit, and then also sort of ask if you could speak to how you can ensure that the people that are being vetted for the systems to choose from, how we can ensure that those people might have those characteristics so that we can make sure that they're steering the LEAs in the right direction, having the right conversations.
It's another great question, and it's critical. I think that's one of the key goals of this grant program, is to really help support transformational thinking, both with the LEAs and within their teams, because obviously it's a diverse group of folks in each LEA that are trying to pull all this together. And you're trying to bring together the academic folks, the fiscal folks, the programmatic. And so we're going to definitely, as part of the application process, be asking the applicants or proposers, whichever route we go, to specifically provide evidence of where they've done work that has been transformational, what their approach is to facilitation, and how they would how they help to push, for lack of a better word, the tough conversations and tough decisions that need to be made. And so we will definitely incorporate that into the vetting process and interviews, obviously through questions.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Kerwin?
Yes. I was glad to hear you say, because I had two questions. The first was, were we going to be able to give them some grounding and coaching and instruction in the blueprint, so that's going to be critical, so that we get them well versed in the blueprint when they do this work. My other question was just, have you consulted with the LEAs about this particular program, and did you get any mean, is this something that you think they would welcome? Did they have any voice in how you shaped it? What's been the interaction with the LEAs about these consultants?
So we did have some, I will say, fairly brief discussions with them about the concept
Uh-huh.
that we were thinking about, and the feedback was positive. We did not want to go too far down that path until the board had bought into the concept. So we will certainly be touching base with them and talking to them about this as we the details are still being worked out. So as we roll this out, if the board approves it, we would be
Great.
getting
So-
more of their feedback.
But so they know about it, and as you say, the initial feedback was positive. Good, thank you.
Mr. Manko?
Yeah, I mean, this might be getting into more of the details that you were just saying that are still being fleshed out. But I'm just thinking about this from the LEA end, and is the idea that they would get a profile of a list of already vetted consultants, and they would go through and they could read the profile, do some background research, go through and maybe interview 2 or 3 of them to figure out if there's one that is a good fit that they feel like there's some alignment with, and then at that point they would forward the name and say, this is the person that we want as our strategic facilitator. And at that point, what do we see as being kind of like the cadence of interactions? Like how frequently do we feel like they would be meeting? Like what is the type of level of support that we would expect and that LEAs could expect from this individual who is connected to them?
Yeah, exactly what you described is exactly sort of the process that we're envisioning. And then once the LEA had selected who they would like to work with, then they would enter into an MOU, a 3-way MOU between the partner, the LEA, and the MOU and the AIB, excuse me. And then as part of that, there would be so as I said, it's essentially $100,000 grant to support this the time and resources of the strategic facilitator. So it would be part of what the LEA and the partner would be discussing as they were deciding who was the best fit and how they wanted to use the strategic facilitator to think about how they would want to use the time, how often they would want to meet, who they would meet with. We are envisioning that we would, put some minimum requirements, like at least monthly, and to make sure that the strategic facilitator would be able to meet with the right people in the LEA, that they were around the table for the meetings so that they were productive. And then, but it really is in some ways up to the LEA and the partner facilitator to kind of figure out what will work best and what they want to focus on and how they want their meetings to happen. I also want to say that so that the time that the facilitators spend with AIB for both the onboarding and training, and then monthly, as we're sort of going back and forth to understand how what needs the LEAs have, and then what additional supports we might want to bring in for those LEAs. That time is going to be won't be paid for out of the $100,000 allocation to each LEA. So that would be, there's a separate $100,000 in the budget to support the time that the facilitators would spend working with AIB staff.
And then I may have missed this, but the term is for a year, and then if this is successful, there's options for extending the relationship, and then what is the plan for funding that in the future, if so?
Another very good question. Yeah. So yes. So right now what we're laying out is to essentially to use the funds that we have available from fiscal 23 to support this program in fiscal 24. And then, as you said, if this program is successful and we would want to, get the feedback from the LEAs, as well as the facilitators, and then AIB's own observations and around whether, essentially whether, the implementation process and the 2024 plans, development of the plans, sort of indicates that that there's more strategic, policy and planning going on. If all that is successful and the board wanted to continue the program, then we would have a couple of options to support that in the future, including we do have $3 million in the fiscal 24 budget that we are in the process of determining how to use that for technical assistance. So we could plan to reserve a portion of those funds for fiscal 25.
Yeah, but also, Rachel, as we go through this process over a couple of years and we've had this additional support, my anticipation is that the level or the magnitude of that will not be as strong as you have in the first 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think hopefully if it is successful, then we're going to see that for a number of LEAs, the benefit is showing in their implementation and in the results, and they wouldn't need they wouldn't have as much need for a strategic facilitator. There may be other LEAs that have a greater need that are still struggling with some aspect of implementation who might still need that support. But I think this is part of a conversation that we'll definitely be having with the administration and the General Assembly as we move forward around what level of technical assistance is expected that the AIB is going to provide in the future.
Okay, any other hands up?
I do
No.
not see any.
All right, let's go on.
So then we would, if everyone is ready, we would have a motion, which I think is Emma, if you can find that document. We have a motion. There we go. Thank you very much. And what this is a motion to obligate 2.6 million of monies that are in our fiscal 23 budget to support this new program. And with this approval, that would allow us to encumber the funds at the end of the fiscal year, which is on June 30th, so that we can move forward with getting this program up off the ground and would have those dollars available to support it in fiscal 24.
Okay. Any question or motion to that effect?
So moved.
Are there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, moved and properly second. All right, the motion is now before us. Any discussion on the motion or comments?
I just have I think I am ready to vote for this, yes, with the understanding that input from the LEAs is received in the creation of the RFP that goes out. Just because the LEAs need to make sure that, or we need to make sure that the LEAs would actually utilize this and craft it the best way possible.
Okay,
Happy to do that.
questions? Hearing none, we're now ready for the motion. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 They're in opposition, please indicate, please. Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Great. Okay, then the next item relates to the advisory committees and a proposal to adjust the terms. Mr. Manco, did you want to handle this?
I definitely can, but I can we
Emma, can you put that document up on the screen?
Yes.
Why-
just- yeah.
Find what the problem is before you make the motion, Joe, or Rachel, or Ms. Manco.
What? Yes, Chair Leggett?
Yeah, would you explain the challenge that we have?
Background.
Yeah, the background.
Yeah, so we about a year ago, we went through and we initiated a process for selecting members for advisory committees. So one advisory committee for each of the pillars of the blueprint. So the advisory committees have been faithfully meeting over the course of the past year, and attendance for the most part has been pretty regular. And they have provided a great deal of input and insight for us as we've gone through and helped to develop and put together the comprehensive plan. So we're really indebted to their feedback and their insight. The year has gone by so quickly, and the terms are now set to expire. So what we had done for each of these advisory committees is we had staggered the terms so that all the members would not be leaving at the same time. So half of the members of each of the advisory committees were given a 1-year term and the other half were given 2-year terms. But seeing as though the year has gone by so quickly, and we would have those folks that had been granted 1-year terms timing out at this point, we discussed it amongst the subcommittee that had helped in the initial kind of selection and engineering of the advisory committee structure. And the subcommittee basically came together and said what made the most sense at this point was for everybody who was on a 1-year term to extend them for a 2nd year. And for those who, actually, am I even
Emma,
saying?
can you scroll down?
Yeah, scroll down, Emma.
There you go. A little further. There you go.
So sorry about that. For those who have a 1-year term, extending them for 2 years, so that we'll still continue to maintain this staggered structure. Essentially, we would have some members that would have 3-year terms, and then some members that would have 2-year terms. And then this would give us until next year before we would have to go through and reselect a segment of members. Yeah, that is the first. That's the first portion of the proposal.
And then if you can scroll a little further, Emma, for the student members.
Yeah.
Other way.
Go down.
There you
Now, clearly we don't want to hold anybody hostage. So if people are interested in cycling off, they have served at this point for their 1-year term and are no longer interested in serving in the advisory committee, they are welcome to term out, and we would go through the process of identifying new advisory committee members to fill their slots. We also have each of the advisory committees had 1 student member, and the student members, they currently have 1-year terms by design. But for each of the student members, the subcommittee is proposing that we offer to each of the student members to extend the 1-year term to a 2-year term. But this would be an option for student members because some student members, they may be going away to college, and this is not a responsibility that they feel like they have the time or bandwidth to do. But on the other end, some people may want to continue serving in this capacity. So basically giving all of the student members a option to continue, but if similarly, if they would like to cycle off at this point, we would go through and reopen the nomination and selection process and find individuals to fill those student member seats. And then as for the chair and vice chair roles, initially this was left to the discretion of each of the committees to determine whether they, who was selected as the chair and vice chair, and what the how that selection process would be maintained. And, it was the sense of this small subcommittee that, we would encourage each committee to have a discussion about the role, the chair and vice chair roles, but really to leave that at the discretion of each of the advisory committees.
Okay,
So,
thank
yeah.
you, Member Manco. All of this, the discretion of the board, because the board created from scratch the Board of Advisors. So I assume that our adjustments or amendments to our process is consistent with our authority to do so. Are there any questions related to the proposal? Well, first of all, let's have a motion to approve the committee's recommendation.
Dr. Kerwin has his hand up.
What, do you want to have the motion first, or do you want me to ask my
Yes,
question? What's that?
Can you
that's
put
the
the
motion
up?
first.
All right. Well, I'll move the approval.
And I'll second it.
I do have a question.
Okay. Moving to second now, Dr. Curran.
Yeah, sure. Joe, I think this is well thought through and it all makes good sense. The one hesitation I have, or one question, is allowing a senior in high school who may be in college to stay on the advisory committee for two reasons. First of all, I think there's some value in having students who are in our schools on the advisory committee. And even if somebody sort of thinks, well, I'd like to stay involved, once they get to college, they got a whole new life and a whole new set of priorities and interests and so on and so forth. So I would have, I'm okay with supporting this, but I would have thought there would be value in not letting someone who had graduated from high school stay on the advisory committee. So I just like to hear your thinking on that.
Yeah, and this is a great question, because this actually was surfaced as a concern by the subgroup, and I'm not familiar with all of the members of the advisory committees, but I think Rachel can probably articulate this a little bit better. But I think one of the examples that was put forward is this year we did have a student that was selected last year as a senior and then started this year as a college student, who has actually been one of the more active members and has provided really, really strong insights. So I think just based on that experience, it seems like, some of this is less about, where the person is doing their schooling and what's going on, but more just their level of dedication and commitment to the position. But I'll defer to Rachel, because I think she would be able to talk a little bit more, provide some more definition around this.
So you said that perfectly, but I will defer to Rachel Amstutz if we want some more information on the advisory committee members and the student members, as she has been our main liaison to all of them.
Sure, that's absolutely correct, Mr. Benko. We did have one student who supported Pillar 3, who was a college student this year and out of state, but he was able to keep it in his schedule and to advise the committee of his schedule so that he would be able to attend meetings as much as possible. And he was a very active contributing member of that committee. Even some of our high school students found that it was challenging to juggle a lot of their extracurricular responsibilities. So I think it was a learning experience for each committee, how to integrate the students. And we learned that we needed their schedules up front to be able to schedule with them in mind. But I do think that we love having our students who are in Maryland schools now, but there was also great benefit in having a student who had just recently graduated, who was able to share his experience going through a Maryland school. So I think that's where the recommendation came from, that both had valid points and that the current students have done a very nice job participating in their committees.
Well, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I'm certainly going to vote for this, but I think it's a little dangerous to base things on an example of one.
We may have to come back and revisit it, but right now, we're going to go with at least I think we'll be wise, just give them the discretion and see how it works out down the line. But it could be a problem going forward, and we want to respect the students and give them the opportunity to make an decision.
So
Okay, any questions, comments on the motion? You had a district comment, Regent, Dr. Corwin?
No, I just that I'm supportive of moving this forward. So I'm ready to vote.
No further comments or questions. We're now prepared to vote. All in favor of the committee's recommendation, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. Any opposition? Hearing none, the recommendation prevails. Thank you. I think we're now going to the appeals amendment process. Rachel, I think
Correct.
we'll,
Ms. Detterer,
is she there?
she is.
Hi, good afternoon. And I think Emma was going to pull up the document, but I'll just refresh your memory from the last meeting that we had. You all approved your appeals policy and process for the release or withholding of funds. And one of the things that you as a board directed Ms. Heiss and I to do was to go back and take a look at what the deadline should be for LEAs and public schools, if applicable, to would be to submit their final plan. So there had to be a point at which, you know, a draft plan could be submitted in the late spring or summer, and there could be a lot of back and forth with the AIB staff and possibly with you know, other stakeholders such as MSDE and some of the other folks. But at some point, there needed to be a final draft in order to trigger the rest of your the other deadlines and meet the other deadlines that are in your appeals process. So in working with Ms. Heiss, it was determined that October 1st would be an appropriate deadline in order to then hit that December 1st initial warning deadline, if you were. And Emma, if you could scroll down to section 2, which I believe is the sort of at the bottom of this page. Perfect, right here. So section 2, subsection A is the only change that we're really proposing for this appeals process. And I'll just read it out. In order for the AIB to meet its statutory requirements, each local education agency and public school, if applicable, that is required to submit an implementation plan to the AIB shall submit the final version of its implementation plan to the AIB on or before October 1 in each year. So that would create sort of an annual process that would allow us to stay on track with our appeals process schedule. I think a couple of things I would want to note here, and I'll ask Rachel to jump in if she wants to add anything. For this year in fiscal 24, we're already moving through this process. So the LEAs have submitted their plans. And so I don't know that we would anticipate that there would be a whole lot done by October 1st of this year. We're really talking about moving into the next fiscal year. And Rachel, if you want to jump in here and talk about what those expectations might be.
Sure. I think so as I talked about earlier, we are in the process of reviewing the LEA plans, and as staff recommends approval or eventually potentially disapproval of a plan that would come starting in July, which will be the next fiscal year. And so potentially, and this is just we'll see. Hopefully we won't get to this point this year, but potentially there could be an LEA that does not have an approvable plan in July that will need to make further revisions, and we just needed to have sort of a final date by which they would need to submit their revised plan for review and a staff recommendation really of to the board of approval or disapproval. So that's where that October 1st date may come into play this year. Well, hopefully it will not need to.
Are there any questions on the proposal of the appeals process? Let me ask the question. This does not require any type of legislation, does it? Or what's that?
No, it does not. The board was already required by law to create this appeals process, but in terms of these dates and deadlines, there's no requirement for additional legislation.
All right. Well, when we could submit our updated plan, we will simply update the plan with these dates in it, I assume, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Any questions before I move to the approval of the process? If not, I would like to entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Is it moved and properly second? Is it second? I second it. Okay, any further discussion on the appeals process? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none. Matter is so adopted. Thank you. Okay, now we're ready for the outcome measures work group update.
Sure, I will go through this. And so I've enjoyed very much meeting every other week with folks who are committed to education policy, education outcomes, and data in the state of Maryland. And just to remind people, as we said, I can't believe it's been a month since we last met, but a month ago, we kind of outlined what had happened. We've had very generative meetings, talking with this work group, coming up with the challenges and affordances of various measures of the potential outcomes of the pillars. We're now in the process of coming up with sort of ranking. We have a list for each pillar of many possible outcomes. So we're asking each of the work group members to rank our outcomes. And we have, if we want to talk more about this, we can. We've had we've gotten through pillars 1, 2, and half of 3. We've had fairly good agreement on which are the kind of the most important things that we should measure. And we've asked the work group members to be very carefully consider the inclusion of both what we'd call leading indicators, things that we're expecting to change right away, but maybe not our ultimate outcomes that we're interested in, as well as those ultimate outcomes. For example, the number of preschool providers is an important sort of output that we're looking for, but really our interest is in having children ready to be in kindergarten. So that's kind of the process of where we are. Then in the next slide, we can see that we're kind of going forward in this month and next month, we're going to finalize that list of measures that will be proposed to the board. And once the board approves those, then hammer out the metrics and set targets. And just like Joe said earlier, he didn't want to hold the advisory board hostage, but we don't want to hold the outcome measures work group folks hostage, but we will likely be asking them to stay on and work with us if they have the bandwidth, or we'll add some more members on as we go through and hammer out those metrics and make the targets. Board member Manko, would you have anything to add?
No, I thought that was excellent. Thank you.
Okay. What are the datelines, the timeline? I didn't follow that closely in terms of when we would expect to have all of the matters before us. Did you indicate that?
I did not. I think I said sometime in July, but so we have 2 more. Do we have 2 more in June or just 1 more in June, Rachel,
Just
of
one
work
more.
group meetings? 1 more in June and
One
then
more, but with another to be scheduled.
with another to be scheduled, but then we have 1 in July as well.
We
And
will be
that's
scheduling one in July. Yes.
okay. So after those 3 meetings, then we'd bring something to the board. Would that be?
Yep. As soon as possible.
Okay,
as possible.
thank you.
Board Member Kerwin.
Yes. Thank you for the report. I want to be sure I understood and followed what you all were saying. So at the moment you're deciding what it is we're going to measure, but you're not putting metrics on it yet. So just for my own understanding, I'm going to make up something. It may not even be on your list. What you're going to measure might be the percent of students who are college and career ready at the end of the 10th grade. That might be an example.
Right.
So right now,
Can we use a different one? Let's just
well,
because
but
that one.
I mean, I'm just doing an example.
I know,
So
I know.
let's say that's one you've agreed on.
Yeah.
And
That one's not a good example though, Dr. Kerwin, because we're still waiting on the results of the study.
yeah, I know that.
Right.
But I don't care about the specific. I just want to try to be sure I understand. Let's say that's something that you agree on, that's going to be something we're going to measure. So at this stage, you're just identifying it. Later, you're going to come back, I guess, post-July and put a number on that.
Even before that, we're gonna hammer out what is the data source, what is the operational definition of how we're using
Right.
those data in that source. Once we've
Right.
done that, only then can we figure out, all right, what's the baseline number then if we
Okay.
use that definition.
And would the number, presumably, the number is going to increase as the implementation goes on over the 10 years. That is to say, there might be a certain percentage in 3 or 4 years, but then we would expect to see a higher percentage at the end. So would these be sort of intermediate target numbers, or would they be the final ones 10 years out?
I think that we'd have a conversation about all of it. About where we would hope to be in a perfect world, where would we hope to be, and what would be a reasonable expectation given the types of changes that are being implemented. Are they things that we would expect to see a sudden change in? Or, for example, number of diverse teacher hires.
Right.
We don't have the pipeline right now sitting waiting to be
Exactly.
credentialed. So, we'd have to discuss when we're going to see that change.
Yeah. So it just for a thought for you all to mull over, I do think it will be important to have intermediate targets because if you set the 10-year target, it will seem way far out there and look like we're failing. Whereas it will be a way of measuring some progress if you can have sort of intermediate targets building to the grand finale. Not
Absolutely.
finale. The ground aspiration. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep.
And if I could just add, one thing the group has talked about is looking at sort of the big measures that with the 10-year targets and intermediate targets, but then also like leading indicators that might show movement in the short term that then over time we would replace with a longer term metric. But to your point, to sort of set targets where we can actually see some change in the near term.
Yep. Board Member Doss.
Yes, thank you. My question is more to the process. Board Member Stapleton, you mentioned that we have identified some targets, and then we're going to identify the data source and so forth. But anyway, here's an example. I saw something on a slide somewhere that said to measure students' satisfaction with career counselors. I may not have the correct term. So if you're going to measure satisfaction, I'm assuming that's qualitative data. So as part of that process after that, for example, to determine how you're going to gather that qualitative data from these students, and then after that, what happens?
Right. Excellent question. And this came up, I was thinking about using this as an example. This came up in our last meeting. The group thinks it's important that we measure under the pillar 3, college and career readiness, that we somehow measure the quality of the counseling services the students might be receiving with regards to college and career aspirations. And so the group thinks that that's an important thing to measure. Now, there's many different ways we could measure that. We could ask LEAs, do you provide quality college and career counseling to your students? Or ask the principals, and they would probably say yes. So maybe that's not the best measure. Maybe we need, and there's been some arguments that we need to find that out from the students. So we did have a conversation in this last meeting, and I thought, well, if MSDE is open to it, there's the Maryland student survey, Maryland school survey. There could be some questions embedded in there that would allow us to just tap into, the student's opinion about whether they're receiving the kind of counseling services they need, or maybe it's only important for seniors or someone further along to reflect on the counseling that they've received. But yes, so we would have to figure out how we're going to measure it and say, okay, this is how it's going to be done. Once we have baseline data initially, then we'll talk about, all right, we're going to expect increases. We're hoping to see increases over this amount of time or this many years. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anything you just need to add, Member Manko, from the previous discussion?
No, I think it was covered. I think Dr. Stapleton did an excellent job, as always.
Well, let me thank both Member Manko and Dr. Stapleton for your input and hard work. This is a very important matter for us, and hopefully we'll be able to produce a result that we can all feel very confident about. So thank you.
Thank you. A lot of credit goes to the AIB staff members who are doing the great majority of the work. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we've covered all of the items at this point up to agenda item 7. Is there anything else we need to do in terms of coverage of all of the matters we needed to vote on today? We've covered all of those, Rachel?
We've covered everything on the agenda, unless anyone has any announcements or any other thing they want to bring up.
Okay. Well, let me just again thank our staff, our executive director, and all the people who've been working on this multitude of issues that I think is quite remarkable. And for a group that started from scratch to build an organization and to put in place a variety of policies and procedures, personally, I believe we've made remarkable progress. There's a great deal of work still ahead. But I think that we're in the right position starting to make certain we have everything in place. So thanks again for the staff. Okay, what's next for us? We're going to, not sure we have,
The motion to adjourn?
yes, okay. Any further questions or comments before we have a motion to adjourn? If not, entertain a motion for that.
I motion to adjourn.
All right, the second, okay.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.